Hello you plonkers and welcome back today to another video on the Druzy channel. The content train keeps rolling, and today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be grading every team's season. So I'm going to grade every team from F to A or A to F. F for failure, D for disappointing, C for content, B for bravo, good season, and A for exceptional. Alright, obviously A doesn't spell exceptional, but you get the drift. If you're new to the channel and you haven't subscribed yet, there's around 50% of people that aren't subscribed with you. Let's bump that number down. Let's get more people subscribed. I'm trying to hit 6k, so if you could help me do that, that would be much appreciated. If you disagree with any point I'm making this video, let me know in the comments down below, and just get in the comments anyway. Let me know how your team did this season. Let's get into the video. Starting off with the Adelaide Crows. They finished last season on the bottom of the ladder, obviously, and they climbed up to 15th. They had two massive wins this season. They beat the Cats in round 1 and they beat Melbourne in one of the games of the year in round 10 as well. So they've shown that they have a fearless mindset. They're going to take it to the best teams. Even if they don't have the quality, they have that killer instinct. They're not scared of anyone, these young boys. Darcy Fogarty, Shane McAdam and Riley Dilthorpe all had good seasons up forward. Some youth in the side. That's going to be a good forward line going into the future. Ben Keys had a breakout season. Could have been All-Australian, but it was a tough midfield to crack into. For that reason, I'm going to grade Adelaide season a C+. Content, but a happy content. You improved a little bit, but 15th, not too great. C+. Next, I'm going to talk about the Brisbane Lions. Now, they had a good regular season. They finished in the top 4 for the 4th time in a row, or the 3rd time in a row. It's the 3rd time in a row. Get your facts right, Druzy. 3rd time in a row, and their most impressive win was that win against Geelong, where they just made them look silly. They played some electric football this year. I especially enjoyed seeing Zach Bailey thrive. He had a breakout year this season, but they crashed out in straight sets, losing to the Premier Melbourne Demons and also the Western Bulldogs, who were the grand finalists, so it's pretty rough. But I'm going to give them a C. Content. If it was based on the regular season, they'd probably get a B+, A-, but going out in straight sets as a top 4 side, you can't be doing that. You can't be doing that if you're going to be considered a premiership contender. And I think Brisbane fans, they're not going to be bravoing. I think they're just going to be like, it's just another season. Didn't improve from their season before, actually took a backward step considering they played in the prelim last year, so it's a bit rough. They probably improved overall, but it's a result-based business. I'm going to give the Lions a C. Carlton, such a young side with not very many elite level players with such high expectations at such a big clubs. I mean, it's a recipe for disaster at Carlton, and they had a pretty disappointing year this year, I'd say. I don't think they should have sacked David Teague. I think they should have stuck fat with him, but they've got Michael Voss in now, and he's a good coach. He's going to do well for the Blues, and they just have to stick fat with him. They can't just keep sacking coaches and expecting another coach to come and turn the tide in 2 years. Like, it just doesn't happen like that. You need to impose your philosophy at a club for a prolonged period. We've seen it with Goodwin, we've seen it with Hardwick, and Carlton, they're just not following that formula. Walsh, Wiedering and Mackay went from B+ B level players to A+ level players this year. Jacob Wiedering didn't make All-Australian, but I'm sure he will in his career. Mackay won the Coleman, and Sam Walsh was an All-Australian in his 2nd or 3rd year in the league. Absolutely incredible. They had a disappointing year, so I'm going to give them a D+, just because they have a lot of expectations on them. I actually didn't expect them to finish much higher than they did, but just given they sacked Teague and it was just a pretty dismal season, I think a D is fitting with a plus on it. Now, Collingwood, I mean, you could probably tell which way this is going, but after winning a final last year, to finish 2nd bottom on the ladder, it's got to be considered a failure. From Eddie Maguire's PR nightmare at the start of the year, the racial allegations that the club faced, they had a decent first couple of rounds off the season, and then after that it just went all downhill. Buckley stepped down as coach. Taylor Adams, one of their most important players, got injured for a lengthy period of time, and then it was all just downhill. I mean, they had some good youth injected. Oliver Henry, I'm a big fan of him. I love his attack on the ball. Finley McRae had a decent season. Poulter looked decent at times. Bianco looks good as well. Bo McCreary up forward, I think he's going to be a good player as well. So you injected some youth into the side, but given the fact that you won a final last year and you finished second bottom, it's a fat F failure for the Pies this year. Now to Essendon, and in my season predictions, I massively underrated Essendon. I think I predicted them to finish in the bottom 4. I think Ben Rutten is the exact man that Essendon needed. We saw him elevate players like Darcy Parish and Nick Hine to a level that we didn't see coming, and Jake Stringer had one of his most consistent seasons, one of the best seasons in the AFL he's ever had. 2021 was a massive season of success for the Bombers, a massive tick for me, and they're going to get the first A of the video. So good job, Essendon. You're getting an A for jumping from 13th to 8th. We'll see if they can make the top 8 again next year. It's going to be tough, but I like a lot of their players. I think they're going to build for a period of sustained success. They're a young side. They can compete with the best. They play exciting footy. I like you, Essendon. Good job. Now, Fremantle. We are slowly improving. We are on an upwards trajectory, but it's just like that. You know, you got Essendon who are sort of going like that, and you've got Sydney who are going like that. Freo, just slowly. We've jumped one spot on the ladder every season since 2016, I believe. It was the most wins we've had since 2015, where we finished on the top of the ladder. I think we had 10 or 11 wins off the top of my head, and obviously everyone knows Freo's young stars in the midfield, Brayshaw, Chera and Sarong, all carried us through the year, but Chera's leaving. Absolute depression. We know how sad I am about that, but the future is bright at Freo. It's just consistency against the top 8 sides, which disappointed me this season, but it wasn't like a season of all lows or all highs. It was just right in the middle. I was very happy with the Derby win, very happy with the win against Richmond, the win against Collingwood. We had some really good wins this year, but also just some terrible performances where we didn't show up. So for that reason, I'm content with the season, but we need to improve next year. I'm going to give Freo a C. Now to Geelong. They showed some great form in the middle of the year. I think they won about 9 or 10 games in a row in the midpoint of the season, but they just stumbled to the finish line. They lost 2 of their last 3, losing to GWS at home, losing to Melbourne at home. Then they went into finals, losing the first game of finals to Port Adelaide, an unconvincing win against GWS, and then getting absolutely slaughtered by the D's. They just finished the season in a very stinky style. They were very hot at points of this season, but Geelong at the moment, their success is a premiership or not a premiership. This season, they didn't win the premiership, but they played some real good footy at times. It'd be hard to give them a D for disappointing, so I'm just going to give them a C+. They made the top 4. I mean, it's not a failure of a season, although they didn't win a flag, which is their only goal at the moment. But yeah, C+, I think, is fair for the Cats. Now, Gold Coast, another disappointing season. They finished in 16th after finishing 14th in 2020. I think they've finished in the bottom 4 for 6 out of their last 7 seasons. So still really no improvement at the Suns. Touk Miller was a clear standout, made All-Australian, but other than that, we only really saw glimpses from some of their young talent. No real consistency from the Suns as of yet. They got beaten by 60 points 5 times this year, 60 or more. Disappointing seasons for the Sun. They're getting a D. GWS are an interesting one. They started the season off very shaky, going 0-3 to start the year, and Leon Cameron's job was on the line at the start of the season. That game against Collingwood, it was almost like a do or die game. They won, and they actually had a good season, the Giants. They played 17 interstate games this season, the Giants, just due to New South Wales government incompetency at handling a pandemic. So they played outside of the state 17 times. They got off to an 0-3 start, and they had one of the biggest injury lists in the competition and still won a final. It was actually a good season for GWS, an underrated season, I believe. They beat some of the best sides in the competition. They beat Melbourne, they beat Geelong, they beat Sydney, but they dropped some games as well. They lost to Gold Coast, and they dropped points to North Melbourne when they drew as well. So they showed they can mix it with the best sides in the competition, but just can't get up for some of those games sometimes against the lower ranked sides. But I like what I see from the Giants. I'm going to give them a B for this season, and I think they'll make the top 8 next year. Now, Hawthorn, they started the season very slowly after that comeback win against Essendon. I think they lost their next 4. They announced midway through the season that they're going to get rid of Clarkson as well, and they were near the bottom of the ladder. I would have given them an F there and then, but they revived their season. They finished the season very strong. Out of their last 6 games, they won 4 and drew 1 against Melbourne, so they finished very strongly. The remnants of the three-peat side are all but gone. There's still some players sprinkled in that side, your Luke Bruce, your Gunstons, etc. But the youth shone at the Hawks this year. Cheng Kuth Jiath was massive this season, a breakout star and a cult figure in the league. You had guys like Moore, Kaczynski and Brockman up forward, all consistently contributing, so they've got some goals from their youth, which is good to see. And obviously you got your Jimmy Warples in the middle, just killing it. Tom Mitchell had a great season as well. So they had a solid season, but they finished in 14th, got rid of Clarkson. A bit of a stinky start up until about halfway, so I'm just going to give them a C. I think that's fair for the Hawks. Now, Melbourne, the Premiers, I mean, what do you think I'm going to say about them? They've won their flag for the first time since coloured TV, mate. They spent the last 2 seasons outside of the top 8. People were calling for Goodwin's head at the start of the year. They win the minor premiership after the sign with a Max Gawn goal, and then they go on to win the premiership so comfortably. They won the qualifying final by about 5 goals, around 33 points, I believe. They won the prelim by 82 and then the grand final by 73. It was a perfect season for Melbourne. They're still a young side as well. Clayton Oliver and Christian Petrarca are around the 24 years old mark. We saw young stars like Luke Jackson, Cozzy Pickett and Trent Rivers look like veterans at points this season as well. Their forward line clicked well. Bailey Fritsch, a middle-sized forward, kicked 60 goals this year. Ben Brown started to click at the end of the season. Guys like Charlie Spargo were just popping up as well. They had contributors from all over the ground. Their defence was impenetrable, well-organised unit. Only dropped 4 games all season. Won the premiership. The D's, you're getting an A++. A double plus for the D's. Now, North Melbourne are a bit of a tricky one because I think they actually did have a good season, but obviously they won the wooden spoon. But I've liked what I've seen from their youth. LDU had a massive season. Jaden Stevenson, Jai Simpkin, Taron Thomas, just to name a few off the top of my head. Nick Larkey had 42 goals as well. So there's some good signs there at the Shinbona Kangaroo land. However, they didn't leave the bottom of the ladder all year. They were there for the whole year. They had some good wins against guys like West Coast. That's it really. That was their best win of the season and I enjoyed it thoroughly as a Freo fan. But staying at the bottom of the ladder all season, I can't give you anything more than a C because no one's content with finishing on the bottom. So I'm going to give the Roos a D. Now, Port Adelaide, they were labelled as pretenders all season by the AFL public after losing games to the Bulldogs at home, to Geelong at home, to Melbourne at home. They couldn't beat a top 4 side at home, but they avenged those first 2 anyway. They beat Geelong in the qualifying final and they beat the Bulldogs in round 23 as well. So they sort of removed that pretender tag at the end of the season. They're just good at beating sides that they're clearly better than. I don't think they lost to a bottom 10 side this season, but they just didn't show up in games where it mattered. Against Melbourne and the Bulldogs in the prelim, they were just clearly outclassed. Razio and Alir joining were massive additions that filled holes in this side. I think they were great additions who slotted in perfectly, but the fact that they crashed out so awfully in the prelim, I'm not going to give them an A, but overall it was a positive season, so I'm going to give them a B. But you know, they need to get into a grand final, otherwise they will be true pretenders because they've crashed out of 2 prelims in a row now. They're just missing something, the Port boys. I don't know what it is. You'd have to ask the pair, but yeah, I think a B is fair for the Port boys. Now, Richmond, they didn't finish in the top 8 for the first time in like 5 years or something like that. Obviously, they've won 3 out of the last 4 flags, the Tigers, but they haven't had a pre-season, like a full pre-season since being a finals side. They've gone into finals deep for the last few years, obviously not getting that full pre-season. They've been hubbing for so long. I think that the Tigers were just tired this season. I think they just need to have a relaxing off-season, chill with their families a bit, and then be refreshed, ready to go again next year. Dusty, Pressia, Cochin all missed a lot of footy this year. And obviously they had a few retirees as well. So a lot of that core of Richmond was missing this year and it's going to be gone next year again. So we could be seeing the end of the Tigers era potentially. I'm not going to write them off just yet, but I don't think they're going to make the 8 next year. And for the fact that they missed the top 8 after being premiers I'm going to give them a D for disappointing. It was a disappointing year for Richmond, and I think the Tigers fans could agree with me on that. You're not going to be content with missing the top 8, but, you know, obviously a great side over the last few years. We'll see if they can bounce back next year. I don't know if they will, but I think a D, disappointing, is fair. Now, St Kilda, they were really hot and cold all year. They couldn't string a good few games together to get consistent W's, and yeah, they were just in the media just about every week with the lack of effort and whatnot. Really hot and cold. Jack Seal was their only real consistent contributor. Max King had a good season, as did Jack Higgins in his first season in St Colours. But after winning a final last year, to crash out of the 8, I think they finished in about 10th. I mean, it's disappointing, isn't it? They're getting a D, the Saints. But they did have a heap of injuries this year, and they played more top 8 sides than any side in the competition, which is a bit rough. I reckon the Saints will make the top 8 next year. Now, Sydney. On the first episode of the Drew Footy Show, I predicted Sydney to make the top 8. They finished 16th last year, and they jumped up to 6th. It was a magical season for the Swans. They were the best of the rest, if you will, this season. Outside of the top 5-ish, who were all battling for top 4. Sydney were, I thought, a premiership smoky heading into finals. Obviously, they just crashed out to GWS by a point down in Tassie, but they could mix it with the best. They beat Geelong at home. They beat the Bulldogs at Marvel, and they beat Brisbane up at the Gabba in the first game of the season as well. I think the Swans are back, and they're back to stay in the top 8 for the next bloody, I don't know how long. I reckon they'll win a flag before the year 2030. Massive success this year for the Swans. They're getting an A. Good job, Swans. Now, West Coast. They have so much quality on that list. They finished 5th last year. Disappointingly lost to Collingwood, but, you know, they'll be back. They'll be back in 2021, bigger and better than ever. No. Very unmotivating footy all season. Just didn't take many risks. Just didn't play the brand of footy that we know West Coast can play, and teams weren't scared of West Coast, it seemed, this year. North Melbourne come to their home ground and beat them. They lost games where they held a lead against Essendon and St Kilda. Just terrible footy at times from West Coast, and of course they lost the Derby for the first time since 2015 as well. It was a massive failure for West Coast. Obviously, it didn't help that they had Luke Shuey out for a prolonged period. Tim Kelly missed footy and McGovern did as well, but it was a massive failure this year for West Coast. So for that reason, you're getting F for failure. Take that, you And lastly, we've got the Western Bulldogs, and they played some really exciting footy this year, led by their champion midfield of Marcus Bontempelli, Tom Liberatore, and Jack McRae. Bailey Smith showed that he might be one of the best players in the competition one day. He's one of the best runners in the comp, and he's a big game player, as we saw this final series. Their forward line was scoring goals for fun. Josh Bruce was great up until he did his ACL. Norton, Waitman, and Hannon all had good seasons as well. Other than a lame end to the season, it was a pretty much faultless year. They dropped their last 3 games and dropped out of the top 4, but they made up for that with their finals, I thought. They beat Essendon down in Tassie after losing a few weeks previous. They go up to the Gabba and win by a point in one of the games of the year, and they go down to Port Adelaide, one of the most hostile crowds in the league pretty much, and they absolutely battered them, only to be beaten by the best side in the competition on grand final day. But they were up by 20 points halfway through the 3rd quarter. It was just magical football that lost them the grand final. I'm going to give the Bulldogs an A- this season. I just can't give them an A given the way that they finished their season. It was very smelly, and obviously losing the grand final by 73 points. It's not like a A, it's like a A- sort of thing. So they're getting an A-, the Dogs. But that's going to finish the video. Let me know down below if you disagreed with any of my ratings. Let me know how you thought your team went as well. I did an AFL trade rumors video yesterday, Drew Footy Show the day before that, and I also had a grand final vlog which I went to on the weekend as well. So check out those videos on my channel. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. I'll see you in the next video. Take care, you plonkers.